Coming up on Chasing the Natty, everyone is in their playoffs officially. Congratulations to all of you who have made it this far. However, records don't matter anymore. It's a clean slate for everyone now, and all that matters is winning each week. In order to help you with that, we'll be here to recap what we've learned from Week 11, and of course, bring you a whole slate of waiver wire pickups just for this week's games. All this and more coming right after this.
Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores.
What a burst! Trayvon Henderson, as advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing Natty podcast. Hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. Many of you, I would hope, celebrating your entry into your league's CFF playoffs for this year, or if you're in C2C, and really, if you're in the playoffs this week, congratulations. You have worked your butt off to get to this point. Either you have coasted through the entire season and this was a foregone conclusion, or the last couple of weeks you have been scraping and fighting for every win that you could possibly get in order to reach this point. So to all of you, congratulations, and let's help you guys win these next upcoming weeks. In order to do that, I have my awesome co-host with me, as always, Mr. Nate Marquise, team member here at Campus to Canton for the CFF team. Nate, how are you doing tonight, sir? Or this morning? Afternoon? I can't keep track of time anymore.
I'm fantastic all day, dude. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter if it's morning, noon, or night. I'm good. Watched a whole lot of college football yesterday. I'm excited to talk about some playoff matchups. My wife had a little bit of a girls' night on Friday night where I was in charge of the kid. So she kind of flipped the script for me on Saturday, took care of all the kid duties as far as bath time, meal time, put her to bed. So freed up a lot of college football watching for me, which was great because the evening slate was some really interesting, high-scoring, action-packed type games. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I had a good time yesterday. For those of you who've listened to this show for a long time, my old co-host Xavier, he and I met up yesterday. We met up at a bar in near Atlanta, and we just watched football for it had to have been like 4 or 5 hours straight. It was just the two of us. It was great. So we ordered a 10-piece chicken finger plate between the two of us, right? Because you're like, okay, that'll be like enough for the two of us. Maybe we order some more food later. Kind of deal. Like, this will keep us going for like a couple hours, maybe, right? And you're thinking chicken fingers, you're thinking like this big. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'm holding my fingers up, and it's probably I'm thinking 5-6 inches long and stuff like that. That's a chicken finger, right?
Right.
These things were like 2.5 inches long.
No, chicken nuggets.
They were basically chicken nuggets. They didn't look all that great either. Literally, I sent a picture to one of my old roommates, and he says that looks like somebody sneezed into the fryer and then put it on your plate. It was like the least appetizing thing. I will say though, it tasted pretty good. Pretty good. But again, it was like $21 for the 10 plate.
Wow.
It was, we split it, but still, it was not worth it at all. I got some sweet potato fries later. Those were actually pretty decent. And Xavier
was it a good viewing experience? Did they at least have a number of TVs going?
They had TVs all over the place. This was a bar made for sports watching. And the best part was there wasn't a lot of people out. Again, the UGA game was at night, so we just caught the noon slate and the first half of the afternoon slate, and so we just sat there for a good while, and there's hardly anybody there. If you ever needed a waitress, you just kind of walked up to the bar and said, hey, this is what we want. It was really, really nice. So great time overall yesterday, and we watched a lot of good football games yesterday, so let's get to it. Do I want to give my spiel now, or do I want to give my spiel later, Nate? You decide for me this week.
Let's do it. Let's go ahead and just fire it off now, man. Go for it.
Well, then let's get right to it. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Love hearing from you guys down there in the comments section. If you're listening to this on podcast, make sure you follow us there and leave a 5-star review wherever you can. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and take a few minutes and leave us a 5-star review and a written review as well. Those help us out a ton in terms of getting the podcast in front of other people who might be interested in this show. So please, please, please do that. Same thing with all the engagements on YouTube and everything. The more you like it, the more you comment, the more you engage with the video, the better it is for us in terms of reaching a broader audience. And one day, again, maybe I'm a little bit of a dreamer over here, but like I put a lot of hard work into this show, and I would love for the show to continue to grow and really become something that you guys will really love to see in the future. So, with all that being said, we are part of the Campus to Canton team here. We're part of the CFF team at Campus to Canton. Is myself, the handsome Nate Marquise above me, Brandon Sanders, Chris Moxley. We got tons of podcasts, articles, rankings, weekly CFF rankings for you guys to help you guys out with these so important matchups this week. Also, go check out our DFS content headed up by Chris K and Ethan Sowers. They have been doing a phenomenal job with all of our betting and gaming content over at Campus to Canton. So go check all of that out. All right, Nate, let's go ahead and talk about some of these games from this past weekend. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with some of the Pac-12 stuff going on, because that was those games were really good, and the Pac-12 found a way to shoot themselves in the foot and basically eliminate a couple teams from playoff contention, like they always do. And so let's talk about this Washington and Oregon game, because that was everything we had hoped it would be as far as shootout potential. Man, that was a really, really entertaining game. What do you think of it?
I'm tilting a little bit because Troy Franklin knocked me out of playoff contention single-handedly. Yeah. So like I when I was watching that game out of the corner of my eye, that was definitely not the fun experience. But like again, like you said, just from a neutral perspective, this game was awesome in terms of just going back and forth. We knew Oregon was going to get caught in these games throughout the rest of the year, especially against teams like Washington, who can take advantage of their porous passing defense. A lot of people are giving Dan Lanning a lot of crap for kind of the end of the game, and I get why. He definitely made some decisions that I think were bad calls. Like, I don't think you go for it on 4th down when you have your backup quarterback in there, Ty Thompson, who you have not shown any ability to trust all year long.
Did they have a timeout in that moment right there before the 4th down play?
I honestly don't know, but I
don't know either, because that was such a weird, the way that whole situation transpired, where Bo Nix comes out of the tent.
Yep.
With like 20 seconds left on the play clock, and he's jumping up and down, like screaming to Dan Lanning, I'm good, let me go. And Lanning just told him, sit tight. And so I was thinking, I was like, maybe he'll call timeout and not run this 4th down play. Surely he's not going to run this 4th down play
with
on
Ty Thompson.
With Ty Thompson on, I think they were on like their own like 38 or 40 yard line or something like that. Yeah, it was just like, man, if you have a timeout, you have to use it right there to get Bo Nix back in the game.
And it's like they had Ty Thompson out there, but they also had Noah Whittington out there. Like, Noah Whittington is not their best back.
Right.
They didn't even have Bucky Irving out there, who's been phenomenal for Oregon last couple of weeks. He'd be a great CFF asset if he could find the end zone every once in a while, thanks to Bo Nix.
Right. Yeah.
But, it was a learning experience for Dan. We give freshmen a lot of like leeway in terms of like, okay, they make freshman mistakes. Mm-hmm. I think the same thing can be offered to Dan Lanning here. He's having a really phenomenal season for Oregon. I think Duck fans are very happy with where their program is already at under Lanning. I think that they will be happy with where he goes forward here. They just got to realize that in his first year, he's got stuff to learn.
Yeah, I mean, his aggressiveness throughout that game is what got them in that position. Same thing that's got them in this position all year long. So I agree with the idea of, well, you've been aggressive up to this point. No need, don't change it now whenever the game's really on the line. But they
were up 7 points, if I remember correctly.
No, it was tied.
Oh, it was tied at that point?
It was tied. It was tied. They were on their own like 38 or 40 yards. It's somewhere between 35 and 40. So it was a situation where if he gets it, then they keep going downfield and they try to kick the field goal or whatever, score to win. But if he doesn't get it, the game, like he's in a really bad spot. And because Washington's a play away from being in field goal range. But yeah, so I like the aggressiveness. I just would have preferred he did it with his best players and not guys that are taking their first meaningful snaps of the year. So
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it was kind of the, another great game with Arizona and UCLA. If we want to slide over to that one, I
was going to point out just a few CFF nuggets from Washington, Oregon, real quick. Again, like pretty much every person that you wanted to go off in this game did go off. If you were a Bo Nix holder, though, I think for the first half of that game, you were definitely kind of shaking in your boots just a little bit, because I don't believe it was until the second half that Bo Nix threw his first touchdown.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like even at halftime of that game, because I was talking with a buddy of mine. He was a Bo Nix owner, and we were talking about this game, and I was like, I think you need to load up on some guys like Franklin and stuff like that in this game to go with Bo Nix and McMillan. So he added a couple of players, and he was like, God, this first half has not been what I hoped it would be. And I was like, I don't know. I get the feeling that they're about to take the top off this game.
I would say 21.
Some things
21 points in the third quarter.
Yeah, as the game kind of picked up, it started to kind of get that shootout feel. It was just kind of choppy in the first half.
Now we can pivot over to Arizona UCLA.
Yeah.
So
what I was just gonna say, it was awesome to see Charbonnet back.
Oh, yeah,
and man, the Arizona defense is the perfect defense to start a running back against.
It is.
It was, if you were a DTR owner, though, boy, that one stung if that was what you needed to get you into the playoffs, because he did not perform at that level.
He got me just enough. He got me just enough. It was great. I needed him in 2 leagues, and he got me enough. So man, I'm not angry at him. But again, if you were relying on 30 points from him, yeah, you're definitely very disappointed.
Dude, it is so awesome having players go against, if you're starting players against Arizona, because they're the perfect fantasy team, because they score. They're similar to Wake Forest. They just score a ton of points, and they score in a hurry, and the games go forever. There's a bazillion plays, and they can't play any defense.
Yep.
But what a crushing blow for the Pac-12. UCLA will match up against USC next week, and yeah, I mean, I can almost fully guarantee that Utah and that UCLA will beat USC next week. That's just how it seems to work out for the Pac-12. That they will find a way to lose their best potential for a playoff contender.
Oh, 100%. Again, I'm kind of rooting for USC to win out from here, and I hate that. I feel dirty on the inside for it, because I don't really like Lincoln Riley and like what he did to Oklahoma and like what he's done with USC and everything. But at the same time, I don't want to see Tennessee in the playoff, because I'm just not a big fan of these teams not even winning their division and then being able to go to the playoff. That feels wrong to me. Yeah. I'm sure Georgia will benefit from it at one point. But again, I'd rather see, conference champions or even people who at least went to their conference championship make the playoff over a team like that. So basically the best way it's going to happen is if USC wins out.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Notre Dame and UCLA left, I believe. Yeah. So
definitely some landmines there.
Yeah, their schedules, and then obviously the Pac-12 championship, whoever that may be. But their schedule is backloaded, because USC has yet to, I don't think they've played any ranked teams so far this year. So this will be their first ranked opponent that they could get a win against would actually be UCLA. So
it's going to be a very, very good game next week. And Mox and I, I'm sure, will be previewing that one later this week, if not as a high scoring matchup, just because it's a great matchup.
The total on that's going to be, I would guess, in the low 70s, mid 70s.
Low 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
Call it now, Nate. Who is the Pac-12 championship matchup?
I will say, so I haven't looked to see what the path is. I'm going to assume that USC beats UCLA, even though I would love to see the chaos if they don't. I just think that they got the best player in the country on their team. So I'll say USC makes it. Let's see, that gives UCLA a third loss. And then I say Oregon beats Utah. So I'm guessing, I think that mathematically that means, because Washington has 2 conference losses. So that loss that Oregon had to Washington, I still think Oregon's in the lead there. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say the long way of saying USC and Oregon.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I didn't realize this until really they were talking about with the SEC this week, that like conference championships are getting locked up at this point. ACC matchup is already locked up. That's Clemson versus North Carolina. Yeah. SEC is now Georgia versus LSU. Big 12 hasn't officially been locked up, and we'll go over there next, where TCU, number 4 TCU, did what many of us thought they couldn't do. They pulled the upset over Texas in what was probably one of the ugliest freaking games any ranked matchup you probably will see ever. Like, we thought this is a shootout potential game. Like, both of these teams were reaching the 30s, if not the 40s. Guys were going to make plays all day long, and neither one of them could really get on the board. It took 2 massive plays from TCU to even find the end zone. One was a 75-yard touchdown run from Miller, another single play that knocked me out of playoff contention in another league. I lost a lot of close games this week. And then Quentin Johnson just being wide open. I was kind of surprised to even see him play in this game, because from what it sounded like, he was headed towards not playing. But TCU does just enough, and quite frankly, they look like they're on the path to 13-0 and possibly a playoff spot, which feels weird. That's not what we expected from a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, a few things stood out to me from this game. One was a lot of people were probably depending on Bijan this week to get them in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy when the best running back in the country is the guy that lets you down, but that's how it played out. Another thing that stood out is that this game just looked to me like it was both teams had a mismatch of their defensive line versus the other team's offensive line. Both of these offensive lines are kind of a ragtag bunch, and they're much better at run blocking than they are pass blocking. And so they kind of beat up on the opposing team's offensive line. Max Duggan does not look healthy. He does not look like the same player since he hurt himself against, I think it was Kansas, maybe. I can't remember exactly which game, but he dinged up his shoulder, and he took a ton of shots in this game. He does not have the mobility that he had earlier in the year. And one thing to look out for, Quentin Johnson did play in this game, but in the last closing minutes of the game, when they needed a third down conversion and they hit him on like a little slant, he picked it up. He re-injured his ankle, and we didn't get to, they couldn't really focus on it, but he could not put weight back on his foot after that play. The guy that was tackling him was one of those moves where he kind of rolled and Johnston's foot was underneath him. So we're back in the exact same boat we were in this game. Just because he played in this game, I do not think that guarantees him that he will play next week. No, great call out on that. And now Texas moves to 6-4. They're kind of heading towards the season that, again, this was a team that people thought was going to be a playoff team at one point, and now they just pulled Texas things. Okay, here we go. Yeah, let me.
They pulled Texas things.
Yeah, let Texas again. The Texas is back scenario. Let the OU guy go on a little bit of a rant.
I was saying, like, we're letting the crimson flag fly here.
Every damn year we go through this with Texas, where preseason it's like, oh, you know who I think's got a real chance at the playoffs? Texas. No, they don't. Every year they have 4 to 5 losses at this time of year. They still have Kansas on the schedule, which they didn't even beat last year. So Quinn Ewers is overrated.
I don't
Texas's
know.
program is a disaster.
I don't know what Texas fans will do if they lose to Kansas again, dude. I don't think that they're ready for that.
The same thing they do every year. They will whine and moan for the rest of the season, and then they'll wake up in next August and think they have a great team again. It's the exact same thing they do every freaking year.
Sounds like another Orange UT that I know. Except they're actually having a pretty decent year this year. Anyway, moving on from the Big 12, do we want to go ACC or do we want to go SEC here, Nate? Which one are we going to?
Let's touch on this Bama game real quick here.
This was a good game. This was the silver lining about Bama not being as good as dominant as we're used to, and like on the offensive side of the ball, is that the games they play in are just a lot more interesting, and they're a little bit more down to earth with the teams they're playing against. Ole Miss started off real hot in this game. Alabama just kind of takes over near the end, and honestly, Bama played, even though they only scored 16 points, they played, in my opinion, probably the best half of football they have played in weeks. In the second half against the Ole Miss game, like that was it truly felt like there was like a locker room speak of like, hey guys, we are Bama, let's go do what Bama does. And they came out and they just won the game, which is probably the most important thing you can do at the end of the day. Quinshon Judkins, man, we argued about it for at length on the tailgate on this past Saturday, which you should go watch that segment. It was a very good discussion about whether Quinshon Judkins would be a factor in this game or not, and man, did he deliver. 25 carries, 135 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Again, Nate, are we talking about him being the RB1 for CFF next year?
He's absolutely on the short list, that's for sure. I haven't had a chance to really break it down and look at it, but he's somebody I would strongly consider. I mean, this is a situation, we don't have to debate this anymore before Ole Miss games. Quinshon Judkins is matchup proof. Ole Miss has not only made it
schedule.
I mean, they have Mississippi State for the last game, the Egg Bowl. So I'm not sure who they have this coming week, but they have made it a point to the run game be the focus of their offense because their best 2 players happen to play the same position at running back. But not only is it the focus, but Judkins is that dude. I was thinking about this as I was watching that game. Judkins is everything we think Braylon Allen is, as far as a back of that size, 220, 225 plus pounds. He's better. He's better than Braylon Allen because, one, he has more lateral movement and more explosiveness in short yardage. And I think he has the ability to develop into a pretty nice pass catcher. And we have not seen that step been made by Braylon Allen at all. So, yeah.
No, I definitely disagree. I not disagree. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Nate. Because again, you're asking me, who am I taking next year in CFF, Braylon Allen or Quinshon Judkins? I'm going to take Quinshon Judkins. Like, I can already tell you that when my first rankings come out, that Quinshon Judkins will be ahead of Braylon Allen. Even though Braylon Allen is the Wisconsin running back, we'll see, rumors notwithstanding. But again, Judkins is really that dude. What did you think of Chase McClellan in this game, Nate? Like, because Jahmyr Gibbs goes down, he doesn't come back into the game. He kind of takes over as the pure between the tackles runner for Bama.
Yeah,
which is a role he fits a lot better than Jahmyr Gibbs does. But it still feels like he's not that Bama running back that we've gotten used to in the past years, where he's designed to run between the tackles. I'm still waiting on a guy like Jamari Miller, the freshman there this year, one of those guys to step up. I understand why they're not playing, but like, feels like they're going to fit that role much better than a guy like Chase McClellan. So what do you think?
I think he's fine. I don't think he's overly impressive. I think it's also a scenario where Bama as a whole just isn't as good as what we've seen in the past years. And Gibbs can kind of hide some of that just because his ceiling is just so elite and his ability to make people miss and that type of thing. He can break off big runs. The opportunity for big runs isn't there like it was with Najee Harris and some of the other, even Robinson, some of those other backs the last couple of years. The line's not as good. The play calling's not as good. As far as Jace moving forwards, I think he's a really strong play next week because I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to play a single snap against Austin P next week.
We'll get into that.
We'll talk about that, but yeah, I think that he's a really strong play. As far as for the future, I think if he comes back and they don't go get somebody from the portal like they did with Gibbs, I would caution Jamarian Miller owners. I just have seen Saban over the years really give seniority a pretty important, it factors in pretty importantly for him. And if you put in the time and you're the next man up, he tends to go with you. Same thing we saw with Robinson, same thing we saw with Najee Harris.
Oh no, and absolutely. And the fact that we're not seeing Miller really earn those carries this year, even with Alabama struggling as it is. Because, again, Branson Robinson's getting carries at Georgia despite the fact that they've seen, obviously they've seen injuries at running back, Kendall Milton, Andrew Paul, stuff like that, but he's still getting plenty of carries week in and week out. Bama has had opportunities to put Jamarian Miller more in the game, and they just really haven't. Not any meaningful snaps anyway.
Yeah,
so,
and I like Miller. I think he's really good. Yeah,
I love Miller. He's great. Yeah. I think he is the next main back of Bama eventually. Right. If McClellan comes back, that's going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
Last game we'll talk about here. Let's go over to the ACC matchup of the week. We've got North Carolina at Wake Forest. North Carolina pulls it out, and the Drake May Heisman campaign continues. Throws for another 448 yards and 3 touchdowns. Game-winning touchdown. Josh Downs catches all 3 of those touchdowns. Absolutely insane day for him. 11 receptions, 154 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He is your wide receiver 1 on the weekend. Drake May, I believe, was the quarterback 2 on the weekend outside of Bert Emanuel at Central Michigan, randomly going off for 48 points. Nate, I got a bone to pick with you on this game. You know what I'm about to talk about. You gave us 3 false alarms when it came to Josh Downs' health during this game in the Slack. Nate comes in 3 different times during the game. He's like, Josh Downs is down. Josh Downs is down. Guys, this is it. He's done. And we're like, and then literally it'll be 2 minutes later, he's like, oh, never mind. He just caught another touchdown. And I'm like, it was the most mind-boggling thing you were doing, Nate.
I am total freak out guy when it comes to injuries. I'm like, oh my God, there it is. As soon as I see a player down, I'm like, that's it. He's done. I'm a total knee-jerk reaction guy. I'm like, that's it. Season's over. And then, but yeah, he kept going down. And then literally 2 plays later, every time he'd come back, he would score a touchdown. And so it made it pretty funny as we had
the third time was pretty funny.
Yes. But man, he is a trooper because he was getting absolutely destroyed in that game. Drake May was getting beat up too. He kept fighting through it. Antoine Green was not fortunate enough to be able to fight through it. He got a head injury and did not return.
Yeah.
Would not surprise me if he ends up sitting against Georgia Tech this coming week. And that's probably good for Downs owners because Green's really the only guy that's proven to take the top off the defense and be that guy. So they may have to focus a lot more on Downs. But yeah, this was a great game. Aside from the injuries, it was so entertaining to watch. I was a little worried early in the game that maybe Wake wouldn't be able to keep up. They've just been such a disaster the last couple of weeks with those 8 turnovers against Louisville a couple of weeks ago. I was like, maybe this offense is just broken and something's not right. Something's not right with Sam Hartman, and that this is just going to be a lopsided game. But nope, no. The North Carolina defense does not roll that way. They will, even if you are broken, they will find a way to fix your offense and allow it just a ton of points. So it was great to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking up something real quick. Is one more person I want to talk about here is our boy Elijah Green.
Got them all again, didn't he? He got every one of them again.
He got it again. He is their dude moving forward. That's what Phil Longo said. He says Elijah Green's their guy moving forward. So guys, big pickup right there. Huge pickup.
Ty Chandler 2.0.
Ty Chandler, not a great running back, but he's going to get every single carry. And in these next couple of weeks, he's going up against Georgia Tech. NC State, not a great matchup for championship weekend. But as we'll get into here in a second, some of you have some kind of tough matchups this week with some of your top players, and that's a great transition over to this week's rendition of the Freakout Scale, bringing it back, and we're going to have a little bit of a twist on it this week, but Elijah Green would be a great guy to pick up off the waiver wire and plug it in for just this week so that you can take care of some of these guys we're going to talk about here. So this week's rendition of the Freakout Scale, we're not going to talk about specific players necessarily, or we're not going to talk about their performances, because a lot of the guys we're going to talk, or the guys we are going to talk about here, are studs. They're awesome. Problem is, this week 12 slate includes several G5 teams going up against Power 5 teams, specifically SEC teams. So it's not even like you could luck out and get Western Kentucky up against Arizona or something like that. No, we got Western Kentucky up against Auburn, which Auburn's rough, but they still got a pretty good defense and they still played an SEC caliber. So let's get into some of these, and we'll start exactly with that one. Nate, Freakout Scale. 1 being start with confidence, don't worry about it. 10, bench these guys for sure. Don't go find another option. Pick a guy up off the waiver wire. This guy should not be in your lineup. And then all the stuff in between. How are you feeling about the Western Kentucky players against Auburn this week?
I would be pretty concerned. Not that Auburn's been some juggernaut on defense, but they are much better against the pass than they are against the run, even though Texas A&M really didn't exploit that on Saturday. But I don't know that if you have, I don't know that you're going to have a ton of better options than Austin Reed, who's been a top 5 QB in the country for CFF purposes this year. So you probably still have to roll him out. The volume should be there. The game script should be there. I worry that we're probably looking at 250-ish yards and 2 touchdowns being maybe very well within play here. And that ceiling, I think, is out the window of his 405 TDs that we've seen numerous times for him this year. So yeah, I'm concerned. I think you still have to start Corley. He's just too good. But I would be a little concerned with Austin Reed, and if I have just like a killer matchup with a guy that's proven it, that I may look in that direction, because I don't love how much talent difference there's going to be in the trenches in this game. I think that's probably my biggest concern. Will he have the time that he normally has? No,
absolutely. So let's put you at a 4 based on what I'm kind of feeling there. So start, don't rely on them. But not so far as look on your roster to see if you have better matchups. You still think that these guys are going to be your studs,
right? If you've got just some really good matchups with a QB that you would normally have a tier or 2 below him, I might consider it. But I don't know that I'm quick to put him on the bench. I'll put it that way as far as Austin Reed's concerned.
Yeah, again, for example, in the Kings Classic League, I am starting CJ Stroud this week against I forget who Ohio State plays this week, but I just know that CJ Stroud's starting. And then I am benching Austin Reed, who's carried me a lot through that league, but I'm also putting in DeQuan Finn. So I have a clear other option that I can roll with for the week.
Yeah, that's a good example. You probably normally would start Austin Reed, but in this particular case, it makes way more sense to get DeQuan Finn going against a much lesser challenging defense. Yeah.
So I am, again, maybe this is a little bit of the bias coming in because I have the ability to bench some of my Western Kentucky shares and everything, but I'm going to be a little bit higher here than Nate. I'm going to put myself around a 7. I don't think it's only started if absolutely necessary. I think there is still some value here. Looking at their game against Indiana earlier this year, Austin Reed threw for 329 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. Probably one of his lesser games of the year, so he can probably, against this Auburn D, probably still squeeze out a 1 to 2 touchdown game, maybe rushing 1 along the goal line, probably still throw for 300 plus yards. But again, it's not I don't think you're going to feel good about Austin Reed's fantasy points by the end of this game. And I think you should definitely take a long look at your roster and say, hey, is there another person here who could easily get me 30 points?
Yeah. They
should be starting over Austin Reed this week.
I will say on the flip side too, if you play in a very deep league and you don't have great quarterback options this week, Robbie Ashford, I think, comes into play. I think that this is a chance when you have a dual threat quarterback and you got a guy like that against an offense that will score points, but a defense that's really bad. I think he's absolutely an option for a very deep type of league.
Yeah. All right. Moving next on the Freakout Scale, we're going to talk about a specific player. We're going to talk about Dwayne McBride. And the UAB Blazers are going up against LSU this week. Once again, another G5 program going up against a SEC team. LSU has been red hot. Well, I don't want to say red hot. They beat Arkansas by 3 points, scoring 13 points. I don't want to call that red hot whatsoever. But even still, they're coming off some really big wins. They're at home. They're going up against a G5 team. They're looking to impress the playoff committee down the stretch here. I am a little concerned about Dwayne McBride this week, going up against them. Dwayne McBride has been incredible this year. He is currently, if I remember correctly, the RB3 on the year. He has just been an absolute beast in conference play throughout the year. But can we expect that once again this week against LSU? LSU is the 62nd in the country for rush defense, allowing about 141.4 rushing yards per game. Again, just because of the talent differential, I have a feeling that UAB is going to come on the lesser side of that. We've seen, now granted, I was going to use UAB versus Georgia as an example. We later found out that it was a generational defense from Georgia, but even still, like, they couldn't get anything going against Georgia last year. Are we concerned about Dwayne McBride here, Nate?
I'm probably less concerned about McBride than I probably am about Austin Reed.
Okay.
Just because I don't think this LSU run defense is all that great. And even if the game script, which will likely require UAB to play from behind, that's just not their nature. I would say he's probably, so on a scale of, 1 to 10, freaking out, 10 being the most, I probably have him somewhere around a 3. I'm not a total, hey, just start your studs, doesn't matter who they're playing type guy. I think it does matter, especially whenever we're talking about playoffs. But he's their offense. Everything runs through him, and he has the ability to make big plays. So I think 100 yards and a touchdown is definitely within his range of outcomes here.
Yeah, because I'm looking through his performance. He hasn't had a week below 18.1 fantasy points on a half PPR format. He has found a way to score points every single week. I do think there's a decent chance that this is going to be his lowest fantasy output of the season. Like, I could see him getting less than 18 points by the end of this game.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be with you though, Nate. I'm going to put him right at a 3, maybe a 4, just so I don't clog up the graphic here. I'm probably a little bit more worried than you are. And I would say just double check your roster, see if there's anybody that is just a clear, they're going to have a good day because it's a good matchup kind of deal. In which case, then you can put him over Dwayne McBride. But unless you have a surefire guy, he's going to kill it for you. Go ahead and put Dwayne McBride out there and rely on him to at least fall into the end zone at least once. They love giving it to him when they get down to the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
Next up here, last one we're really going to talk about here, and honestly, I probably could have put our Utah conversation here, Nate, as well, so we could talk about that here in a second if you want to. But first, we'll talk about Alabama offense going up against Austin Peay this week. Completely different here. No, we're not going to tell you about Austin Peay players. We're going to talk to you about Alabama offensive players. One of the biggest conundrums you face as a CFF asset fantasy manager is when your teams go up against just lower competition. How much you trust them to play enough snaps for them to get the points you need by the end of the day? Because they're going to play less snaps. However, they're probably going to get more yardage per snap out of those snaps. So you can still have a really, really good day. But if you don't hit those big plays, if you don't see them, if you don't see them, we're going to try this one more time. If the defense starts scoring touchdowns, their special teams start making plays, turnovers happen really quickly, you're just not seeing the normal yardage you typically see with them, their days can end really low very quickly. So, Nate, how are we how are we now navigating specifically Alabama versus Austin Peay, but for any team that is going up against these lower competitions this week?
Yeah, I this matchup terrifies me if I'm an Alabama, if I'm an owner of an Alabama player for a variety of reasons. And it's for me, it's more specific to Alabama than just about anybody else, because a lot of the other SEC does this where it's like the week before their rivalry games that end the season, they play these these rum-dum, just easy blowout cupcake games. Yeah. And the problem is Alabama is just talent-wise so far ahead. Yes, if they don't score with their studs, the guys that you're starting for Alabama in the first 2 quarters, forget about it. Not only are they going to be pulled, but you're looking at potential for defensive touchdowns taking place, kick returns, pump blocks. All that comes into play because they're just so overwhelming talent-wise. Not even to mention the fact that a lot of these leagues, which I 100% disagree with, a lot of these leagues will penalize you if you play an FCS opponent. And this matchup right here alone is why I hate that rule more than anything. I don't think it should be a deal, because you're only getting Bryce Young for a max of 2 quarters in this game. And if he doesn't go bananas in those 2 quarters and you're getting penalized like that, this is a worse matchup for him than playing Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like this is, for playing anybody really. So I hate that. I still don't think you can sit Bryce Young, if you're getting 100% of your points. I don't think you can sit Bryce Young. You got to just, you got to hope that he gets it in those first 2 quarters. But I do think that they're pulling him at halftime. I think this is a great opportunity for Saban to see what he's got behind him, get a better look at Milroe versus Simpson, get a better look at some of those younger guys. We could see Jamarian Miller get some run in this game.
I would love that.
So yeah, I would be terrified if I'm starting. I don't think you start Gibbs at all, number one, because I don't think he plays.
No.
If he does, we're probably looking at about a quarter. I think Jace McClellan is in play just because of Gibbs being out. But I mean, like I said, you better hope he breaks off a big run in those first 2 quarters.
Yeah. And the thing, I'll give a little bit of hope here for Bryce Young managers is I still think they have a lot to work on with this passing game. And that's exactly what these matchups are for. Kirby does this, Saban does this both. When they have these cupcake matchups, they take the opportunity to solely focus in on things that the team has to work on. And so because we've seen Alabama still struggling in the passing game throughout their conference schedule, I think you'll see Bryce Young still throwing the ball plenty, trying to figure out who are they going to rely on at receiver the rest of the year. We'll definitely see. Nate, I don't have a graphic for it. I should have made one for it, but I figured this would be a good time to also talk about Tavion Thomas.
Yeah.
Because where do you have him on the freakout list? Because he basically was non-existent for Utah until this past week against Stanford. 22 carries, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Tavion Thomas we've been wanting all year.
Yeah.
Where the hell did this come from? Why this week? What's going on here? Should I expect this again next week? What are we doing here?
So I think it's a combination of a couple of things. Jalen Glover was injured. He didn't play. The other running backs have been dinged up. So, and they've been working to get him. Apparently he had to jump through some hoops in order to get back on track and in the good graces of Kyle Whittingham. And apparently he's done that, which is great. But I think this was a game where it was that combined with Stanford's rush defense is bottom 10. They're right there with Arizona and Colorado State and all those other terrible defenses. So it was kind of a perfect case scenario where he was kind of last man standing and the defense was just not going to be able to stop him. But he's good. He's really good. He finally got to show it again last night. I'm 100% back on board. I've been waiting for this game. I know Fantrax says that he's at 100% ownership. I find that so hard to believe that people sat there and did not that he didn't get dropped for the last few weeks when he was not even traveling with the team.
You would be surprised. You'd be surprised by the stubbornness of CFF players sometimes. Dude, I held on to Tyler Shuck the entire time that Donovan Smith and Baron Morton were
Yes.
playing for Texas Tech. I had him on my bench, on a very shallow bench, mind you, for
At
forever,
least
waiting for him to come back just in case.
At least in that case, you could justify it in your own head because the coaching staff there at Tech is like, sure, we're playing them all. We're going to play them all. Every week they tell you Tyler Shuck's playing. Meanwhile, Utah is saying, we don't like him. We don't want to play him, basically.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But yeah, no, I don't have their last two games up in front of me. Obviously, Oregon is one of them. And I think the Colorado is the other game that Utah has.
Oh,
Dude,
God.
if you've got Tavion Thomas, I start him both games, and I do it
There's
with
no
quite
way.
a bit of confidence.
Yeah. Unless he craps the bed next week, in which case then you're just back to the, what are we doing? What are we doing each week?
Yeah.
Let's get to the quarterbacks here for our waiver wire pickups. Our theme this week, no dynasty plays this week. We're going straight guys you could pick up more than likely off your waiver wires this week that you can start in playoff matches this week and have some pretty good matchups for you guys. So let's get through these relatively quickly. We got about 45 minutes left. We're about halfway through, so I think we can pace this out pretty well. First quarterback up here, we got Michael Pratt, quarterback out of Tulane, 28% rostered on Fantrax. He's going up against SMU this week. SMU's defense, definitely something that quarterbacks can take advantage of. And I've mentioned this before that Tulane has been very, very good about adapting to the kind of games that their opponents are giving them. If they're winning, it's going to be a low-scoring affair. Their defense steps up, keeps the offense down. If the defense bends and breaks, they're willing to get into a shootout. We saw that against Memphis. We saw that against South Florida. We saw that against UCF this past week. And in those games is really when you see Michael Pratt really go off here. And I think that SMU's offense is good enough, especially now Tanner Mordecai seems to have found his mojo again. I think this is a matchup where Michael Pratt can have a lot of good work moving forward for here. So what do you think about Michael Pratt this week, Nate?
Yeah, I like this start quite a bit. He's probably my second favorite out of the five on our list here today. It's SMU. If I'm reading that correct, they have SMU this week,
Yes.
right? That's a just perfect matchup. Start him. Start Tajay Spears. It's the best you could hope for because SMU will be able to keep up with Tulane a little bit, and they do not play good defense. So yeah, I say start him with confidence. This is a good example of if you own Austin Reed and you would never start Michael Pratt over Austin Reed, but this week I think it's worth considering. I think Michael Pratt's ceiling might actually be a little bit higher this week.
Yeah, so. that again. That's why I wanted to focus. We first focused on the idea that our waiver wire pickups are going to be just for this week. These are not this week and next week plays for playoffs. Just to be clear, this is all about just this week. You could still keep them on your roster for next week. Some of these guys got good matchups this week, but I only looked at what they were doing this week.
Yep.
And it is to help you out with matchups like Western Kentucky going up against Auburn, help you out with Dwayne McBride going up against LSU, because if you really are afraid of matchups like that, there are options out there for you to take a look at. I mentioned Elijah Green earlier. I didn't have him as one of our waiver wire pickups for this week because we talked about him last week, but he's definitely one as well. Michael Pratt, the one last thing I'll throw out here, he is difficult to counter in terms of receiving guys because there's not a set receiver that he throws to. It could be the tight end. Oh my God, he's my favorite. Oh my God, why am I blanking? Tyreek James. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Tyreek. You're my favorite. For some reason, I just blanked on your name completely.
I still love you.
Love you to death. Shea Wyatt. He's good but inconsistent. Deshaun Jackson, good but inconsistent. Deuce Watts, Fat Watts. All these they got good receivers. It's just none of them really step up. So nobody's going to be picking them up off the waiver wire and starting them against you, hoping to counter you. Next quarterback we got up here. This one, bit of a caveat here. He got injured this past week against Miami. I don't know if he will be back or not, so definitely keep an eye out for injury information for him. But I'm talking about Zach Pyron, the freshman quarterback at Georgia Tech. who, since he started 3 weeks ago, has had a pretty good start, I would say. Again, 17 points against Florida State. It's not great, but for a first start against a pretty good defense in Florida State, I would say, pretty good job. Up against Virginia Tech, 26 points. He had a pretty good day there. He ran the ball quite a bit. Miami of Florida, he was on his way to a pretty good fantasy day. He had over 15 points before he got injured pretty early on in that game. So if he is back for this week, he's got an epic matchup here. He's going up against UNC, which, if you haven't learned anything by this point in the year, is that anybody going up against UNC is definitely somebody to look out for. And we'll talk about another Georgia Tech player to look out for here in a little bit. But Nate, outside of the injury concern here, again, obviously, if Pyron turns out to be injured and out for the game, don't play him. But what do you think about Pyron, assuming he plays?
Well, so I was looking it up a minute ago while we were discussing, while you were talking a second ago, and the rumors are he does have a broken collarbone. So there seems to be a lot of that floating around. I'll put it this way: there's a ton of smoke. So I don't know. I don't know that we need to spend too much time on him.
Well, then I'll shift it. Then Zach Gibson is the backup.
Zach Gibson's terrible.
I would say, the problem is he's bad.
But no, I think there's a chance. I don't know what the deal is with Sims. Because supposedly he's practicing. Supposedly he's out there, but he's not. It almost feels like he's entered the portal, but he hasn't officially yet. It's kind of weird. I think this is actually a game where we could see Fomichan, however you pronounce it, Tyson Fomichan, the transfer. Yeah, the transfer who came over from Clemson, right? I think he might actually be the guy that gets some action in this game. So I think it's a total avoid right now for me, which sucks because it's North Carolina and you don't want to avoid them, but too much injury and weirdness going on there.
Dang. I guess we'll move on then. Next up here, we got Will Howard, quarterback out of Kansas State. Adrian Martinez almost cost me a playoff spot this week. A lot of players costing me and almost costing me playoff spots this week. Adrian Martinez goes down to injury again because apparently his body is made of paper mache now. Will Howard steps in once again and just does Will Howard things, has another pretty decent day, and fits right into this Kleinman system that he's been running over there at Kansas State. Another 20 fantasy points yesterday against a pretty decent Baylor defense. He's got West Virginia this week, and West Virginia is one of the worst defenses in the Big 12. I believe that Kansas State absolutely could take advantage of this, and Will Howard, like I said, he runs that offense extremely well. No reason to believe that he couldn't put up at least like a 25 to 30 point fantasy day for you, and you call it a day. So Nate, what do you think here?
Yeah, I love it. This is the one that I actually probably prefer even over Pratt. If now the risk here is that you do have to monitor Adrian Martinez's status. Yes. Because it didn't look like his injury was that bad. But I think there's a chance. So they've been trying to preserve Will Howard's red shirt. And so far he's used up 3 of the 4 games that he can possibly play. Mm-hmm. He can play one more and then red shirt. So they could technically start him this game against West Virginia and then go back to Martinez. So keep that in mind for the last game of the year. You may just be picking him up for one game in Will Howard. Will Howard is better than Adrian Martinez. He's better for this offense than Adrian Martinez. He's not as explosive, but I will say this is a great matchup against West Virginia. They're not very good on defense. And if Will Howard is healthy going into next year, he's actually been a little dinged up. He's a good runner, and we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that from him this year because he's been a little dinged up from the first game he played against TCU. But he fits this. Colin Klein's the offensive coordinator there, and if anybody remembers Colin Klein, he was a fantasy just absolute monster, and he even went to New York as a Heisman Trophy finalist. And Will Howard is like a spitting clone of him, but actually passes the ball a little bit better. So I love this. If we get word that it's not going to be Adrian Martinez this week, I love Will Howard for this matchup.
Yeah, I mean either one I think works really well for this matchup. Again, obviously Adrian Martinez I think either one of them. This is a matchup that you would want to play either one, whoever starts.
If you own Adrian Martinez, this is a must pickup for you.
Oh, 100%
to get that handcuff, and then you can potentially go back to a more healthy Martinez in the championship week,
and then hope he doesn't get injured again.
Right. But there's talk that the fans are pushing really hard that they want Will Howard to they've got a really good freshman QB coming in next year. They're like, why do we want to redshirt him so that he can have like 3 years left after this year? No, just play him, and then he'll have 2 years left, and then we can go to the freshman.
I would be surprised if Avery Johnson stays at Kansas. From one running QB to another. Let's go over to San Diego State, where we got Jalen Maiden. It looks like they finally have settled in on their quarterback, and it is a guy that is pretty good at running the football. He is going up against New Mexico this week. He has, over the last 3 games, seen 2 hit above 28 points. As long as these teams get into a shootout, he seems to be a guy that you love to see. My only concern is, again, New Mexico, while they're a bad offense, they got a pretty stingy defense. And so I could see this game being kind of a lower scoring game. I'm not as confident in this one, but Nate, you specifically asked to put him on here. So what do you like so much about Maiden this week?
I just think that, I think that the staff has enough confidence in him now where they're kind of opening up this offense a little bit. And he went up against San Jose State last weekend, who's proven, or this past weekend, who's proven to be a pretty good defense so far this year. And he still put up almost 30 fantasy points. So I think that even against a decent New Mexico defense, I still think that he could put up some points here. I think he has proven that he can open up this offense, and they just kind of look a lot different now, and the staff has confidence in him.
Yeah. Last quarterback we'll run through here real quick. Very similar, again, super similar, same conference, same running style quarterback, but we got Taylor Green, quarterback out of Boise State, 7% roster. He's going up against Wyoming this week. Wyoming is awful. He has seen some pretty good weeks the past couple of weeks, 2 games above 20 points. If you're really looking for a pretty safe play, I think Taylor Green is your guy here. He provides a pretty nice, safe rushing up floor right there. Opportunity to run into the end zone at any given time. Nate, any additional thoughts on him?
Yeah, this is probably a deeper play, but I do think that there's big play upside with him. He's not a great passer right now, but he can bust off, a 40-yard touchdown run at any moment, and I think Wyoming allows for some of that. So yeah, I just think that he's, if you're digging around for a deep QB move, I think he is a decent option for you.
Yeah. Last quarterback I'll throw out here real quick as an honorable mention, partially because we talked about him last week, and I've already told you I liked his last 2 weeks here, but also because he got injured last week. So once again, you got to be lookout for what's going on there, and it's Rice. So good luck finding any information. But TJ McMahon. He's got 2 good matchups the last 2 weeks. He's going up against UTSA this week. Next week, he's going up against North Texas. If he starts, he is the reason why that offense is even humming. Just look at what happened to that offense after it was already a bad day for McMahon. He had 2 picks in the end zone last week, and then he got sacked and injured, and then the offense completely fell apart. If you were like me and you started Rosner or McCaffrey last week, you were crying into your pillow that night. So definitely something to look out for. If he starts again this week, I would heavily consider putting up against UTSA. Running backs. This is the one where I felt like we have the best options to look at here, Nate. Again, if you're struggling at running back this week, this is where I think you want to go and find your guys. And we'll start off with the first one here. Mr. Devin Maccabee, running back out of Purdue, 16% rostered on Fantrax, going up against Northwestern this week. Talked about him a couple of weeks ago. He then went and got injured. And since then, pretty much whenever Purdue is in a close or ahead in a game, he is getting upwards of 20 to 30 carries. And whenever they fall behind, like they did in the Iowa game, he gets game scripted out pretty quickly, unfortunately. But they're going up against Northwestern this week. I would be surprised if that is not a close or a game that Purdue pulls ahead in. So I expect Maccabee to get plenty of work this week. Nate, what are your thoughts on Maccabee?
Yeah, this is a great matchup for him. This is probably my second favorite of the 5 running backs that we have listed here. Say what you will about Brahms' offense, and they throw the ball a ton, 40, 50 times a game. But when he finds his running back, he only uses one running back, and that running back also can come into play with you'll be a factor in the receiving game. And we saw a little bit of that. He had 6 targets against Illinois. I'm blown away. I can't believe that he ran for 100 yards and a touchdown with 25 or 26 receiving yards against Illinois. They've been just shut down defense. That looked like a terrible spot to start him. But Northwestern is a fantastic spot. Northwestern is one of those bottom 10 defenses that you want to start players against.
Yeah.
Mo Ibrahim just got through running for, I think, like 78 carries and 645 yards against Northwestern. So, I think 100 yards and a couple of touchdowns is what we're probably looking at here for Maccabee, a former walk-on. It's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, you love the walk-on stories. Trust me.
That's right, man. He's good.
So, again, Maccabee, very good matchup there. We'll go over to another running back here. Let's go to Nakia Watson, running back out of Washington State, the former Wisconsin running back. Nate, you talked about it earlier. You want to start the dudes that are going up against Arizona. And not only is Watson a dude going up against Arizona, he has been on a pretty good roll the last couple of weeks since he has come back from injury. He has had 2 games, 26 and 34.8 fantasy points respectively, 2 100-plus yard games, 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. Washington State is not this throw-it-all team that we wanted it to be in the preseason. They're running the ball quite well, and Nakia Watson is a huge part of that now. So I feel really, really good about this play this week, and this is definitely somebody I'm targeting on the waiver wires in terms of people to start in place of guys like Dwayne McBride if I can get him.
Yeah, this is my favorite of the running backs this week.
Probably my favorite as well.
Yeah, I mean he's been just an absolute stud with over 150 total yards and at least a touchdown in both games since he's been back from injury. I thought that Jalen Jenkins was going to run with this job whenever Watson went down early in the season. And then Jenkins got hurt. And
then Watson, he got hurt.
Yeah, and then Watson comes back, and this staff has not been shy about feeding him the rock. So it's Arizona. They're going to score points, and Washington State is going to want to lean on the run game in order to slow that Arizona offense down and give their defense some breathers. So, I think he gets 150 yards and at least a touchdown in this game. I think he's probably somebody that's going to be in Moxley's top 20 for his weekly rankings. I mean, it's a great matchup.
This is one of those ones where, like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, everything lines up for him to have an awesome week. Yeah. I still have that nagging feeling in the back of my head of, like, he's gonna hit, like, 40 yards and not get a touchdown for whatever reason, because that's just how CFF works sometimes.
Yeah.
Next up, let's go to a backup running back here, but like it's one that I think is an important one this next week. Devin A-Chain is out. He's got a boot on his foot. I don't think he's coming back anytime soon here. And so last week in a terrible game for Texas A&M, not a lot of bright spots.
We couldn't help ourselves, could we?
No.
With Texas A&M. We found a way, even when we're trying to talk up a player, we still find a way to talk down about A&M for a minute.
I wonder what kind of odds you could have gotten before the season that said that Texas A&M would not go to a bowl game.
I don't know.
Anyway, but again, few bright spots in that game, but one of them was Amari Daniels here, the running back at Texas A&M. He got 11 carries in this past week, 83 yards out of them. He was popping off at 7.5 yards per attempt. Very, very good game for him. I think A&M might have found something here, a guy they can rely on with Devin A-Chain out. Definitely somebody to look out for next year if A-Chain does not come back, I might add. And guess what? The best part is he's going up against UMass. Even A&M can't find a way to screw that one up, I hope. Jesus, Jimbo.
Oh, how great it would be if they did, but
Uh,
no, they won't.
they won't. So again,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, this is one that you can just, this is a super deep league play as well. Just kind of throw it up against the wall, see what sticks here. But Le'Veon Moss got the start for A&M against Auburn. He was awful and did nothing, and they quickly went to Amari Daniels, and he got pretty much all the carries in the second half. So this is just kind of a situation where if Amari Daniels looks like he's going to start the game and they give him the ball, you can't not be successful against UMass's defense when we're talking about the run game. There's always a chance in this game, like we talked about with Alabama against Austin Peay, where Weigman, has a big day, 300 yards through the air and a few touchdowns. But the problem is they're down to two running backs that they're scholarship running backs that they're playing. It's Daniels and Moss. I mean, there really isn't anybody else. And I can promise you don't go from being in a boot to coming back and playing against UMass the next week. So A-Shane is out. Just count on that.
I would definitely agree with that. I like this play definitely in a deeper league. See what happens out of the two of them, because maybe Moss does have a better day next week. But like you said, if they're splitting the carries at all, Daniels is going to be a big part of that. Yep. From one SEC running back to another, let's go talk about Cody Schrader. Running back out of Mizzou. Once again, Nate scared the crap out of all of us last week when he just kind of randomly threw out the idea that Eli Drinkwitz might go back to Nathaniel Pate. That didn't end up happening, thankfully. Cody Schrader was still the main running back out of Tennessee against Tennessee last week. Not a good week, though. 10 carries, 25 yards. Quickly, game scripted out. Tennessee they had to keep up with Tennessee, and it just wasn't working out for them. And you might say, oh, that's pretty bad for him moving forward. Well, guess what? He's going up against New Mexico State this week. Mizzou, Eli Drinkwitz, they love to run the ball with just one guy whenever they can. Schrader is that guy right now. And again, they're going up against New Mexico State. He is going to find the end zone at least one or two times during this game. Mizzou is going to be scoring way too much for him not to. I like him to have a very big week this week. Nate, what do you think?
I'm nervous about this one. I have my concerns, and I would have a tough time endorsing anyone starting Cody Schrader. Yes, it's New Mexico State, and I would have 100% been on board with this one before last week. But Drinkwitz did use the other running backs a little bit more. Schrader went from basically getting like every carry to Pete and Elijah. What's his name? The young guy there. I can't remember. Anyways, he got some run too. He got a handful of carries. That's a little concerning for me that we may not see the volume that we thought we were going to get out of this game. So there's still a chance that they roll with him, but I do think that we don't see any more than maybe like 12-ish carries.
Well, he can break one. Trust me, my Georgia Bulldogs found that one out.
That's weird. Isn't that weird?
He can't outrun Georgia's defense, but I bet he can outrun New Mexico State's.
It's like his longest run of the year. I think it did come against Georgia. Where
it was a long run.
Yeah, and I watched this guy play, and he can't outrun anybody. And I'm just like, how did he get that long run against Georgia?
Well, he didn't outrun him. Like, they caught up to him eventually.
Yeah, he's just, the problem with him is, and he's an absolute just grinder, and he gets you 3 yards a carry. It's basically what he's been averaging the last 3 weeks. But it is New Mexico State. If you told me he was going to get 80% of the carries, I would say he's an absolute start. I don't know that we're going to see that, though. That's my concern.
I'm more confident.
Okay.
I think them spreading out the carries just a little bit last week. First of all, again, no other running back got more than 3 carries.
Right.
I think it was more about them just trying to spark something, seeing if they could get a change of pace out there. Once again, it was they fell behind. A plotter like Schrader was not the guy they needed in that moment, so they tried to move to somebody else, see if they could get anything going. I think he's back this week.
Real quick, side note here. If you're a Missouri fan, how much do you love the idea that you give him an extension just to watch Drinkwitz lose to Kentucky with some pretty borderline coaching calls and then get boat raced by Tennessee? It's just like, man, I don't know that they're loving an extension based off of a really underperforming year. It just seems crazy.
It seems like his agent knew exactly when to strike while the iron was hot.
Right.
That's
Right.
it. Again, he
Winning
pushed
against South
Georgia.
Carolina gets you an extension. That's crazy to me.
It was the Georgia game, I feel like, that got that rolling more than anything else. And then he followed it up with the South Carolina win. It's like, oh, see, we're on a new streak here and everything. Got the extension. Was like, all right, boys, kick it back for the year. We ain't doing crap. Anyway, last but not least, let's go to another SEC running back. Got 3 of those this week. Got a good slate here. We talked about Dwayne McBride going up against LSU, but let's talk about the running back on the other side of the field. We got Josh Williams, running back out of LSU, 2% rostered. He has been on a roll recently. 10 plus fantasy points in the last 4 games each. 19 carries against Arkansas last week for 122 yards. Against Ole Miss, 17 carries for 76. And then against Florida, he had 14 carries for 106 yards. He has gotten a touchdown in 4 out of the last 5 games. It's hard not to start him in a game against UAB where we expect at least LSU to find plenty of scoring opportunity against a G5 opponent. Nate, I like this quite a bit. I think this is a great call. Credit to you on this one for pointing this out. Anything else you want to add on him?
No, I think it's a solid option. The concern is, like we talked about with Alabama, if Jaden Daniels gets hot early, gets a few rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown, and by halftime we see the starters kind of pulled. One of those situations is kind of worst case scenario, but I don't think LSU's defense is capable of keeping teams down. So I think it's a solid play here. There's an issue with the floor, but like you said, he's gotten in 3 of the last 4 games, he's gotten over 14 carries. So the volume's not bad. No,
not bad at all. Couple of honorable mention running backs I want to throw out here real quick. First of all, Saban Garrett is still at 39%, y'all. I ought to flog each and every one of you that is allowing this to continue. He is a beast. Bangura go bang bang.
Only thing I can think of is that I don't know, are 61% of the league's best balls, and he just didn't get drafted in them?
No, because I've seen people go well above the 40% margin. Because anyway, we'll get into that later. And then 2 other running backs I want to throw out here. They're going against each other this week. Kyrie Robinson, running back out of San Jose State, had a rough week this past week against San Diego State. Got game scripted out just a little bit. But he's going up against Utah State. I expect that game to be a lot closer, if not favorable to San Jose State, and he should have a pretty good day there. And then the other one is Calvin Tyler, the running back out of Utah State, going up against San Jose State. A little less great about that one. Again, he'll be at game scripted a little bit more. I don't expect Utah to be ahead in that game, but I can't ignore the fact that he has had a lot of good games recently, even in games where it seems like Utah State would not have been close. So I'm going to throw him out there, and you guys do your own research on whether or not you think he has the stats to back up a start this week or not. Let's get over to the wide receivers here, Nate. Last section we're going to go to here. I'll explain why with the tight ends here in a little bit. It's not a long explanation, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on the tight ends this week. Let's talk about these wide receivers, Nate. First one we got up here, Elijah Badger, wide receiver out of Arizona State. 24% rostered on Fantrax, and he is going up against Oregon State this week. We talked about Oregon State a little bit last week with Chris Moxley. We don't love running backs that go up against them. I'm a little bit concerned about Validated this week, but they do give up quite a bit in the pass, and Elijah Badger has been on a roll recently. He has, in the last 5 games, he has seen 9+ targets in each of them. He has seen 18+ fantasy points in half PPR formats. In 4 out of the last 5, he has scored at least 1 touchdown. In 4 out of the last 5 games, he has scored 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. When Arizona State needs to move the ball through the air, this is the guy they go to. And they're going up against Oregon State this week. I feel like Oregon State's going to be ahead. They're going to need to pass the ball a little bit more to keep up with it. I feel pretty good about starting Elijah Badger this week. What do you think, Nate?
I'm probably a little bit less confident than you are. I don't love starting passing options against Oregon State's defense. I think probably 15 points is maybe what you can count on here, about what he did against Washington State. I think that's a pretty comparable defense. I like some of the other options on our list today a little bit better, but you are getting a clear, Arizona State's clear wide receiver one there. His volume has been really nice over the last half of the season here.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to believe in him in the first half of the season and everything. I just didn't want to believe in any Arizona State wide receiver. I didn't like their quarterback situation and everything, but he's been too consistent for me to ignore at this point, so we're going to roll with him. Next up here, we talked DeQuan Finn very briefly earlier. Let's talk about one of his top wide receivers here. Jerjuan Newton. Yes, I did look up how to pronounce that name. Jerjuan Newton, wide receiver out of Toledo, rostered on 11% of rosters. He has been another wide receiver that has seen pretty good work the last couple of weeks. He has seen 6+ targets. We'll go back a little bit further. 6+ targets in 4 out of the last 5. Maction games, he's been doing very, very well. Double-digit fantasy points in 4 out of the last 5 games. And he's going up against, thank God, Bowling Green, not one of these sneaky good Maction defenses like Miami of Ohio or a team like that. Bowling Green has been very porous, and I expect Newton to have another pretty big week here. So, Nate, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I like it. He's been pretty boomer bust lately, but if you look at it, the 2 games that he was down, where he did not do much, he didn't have much fantasy output, with the games where the quarterback, brain fart here, what's his name?
DeQuan Finn. Geez.
It was the games where DeQuan Finn was also banged up and either didn't play or left early.
Good call.
So when he's with DeQuan Finn, his numbers have been really, really impressive. So yeah, I think you can throw him out there with confidence now that we've seen Finn back, and you saw his fantasy output rise as soon as Finn was back in the lineup.
Yeah. So I like this call quite a bit. I also like the Toledo tight end Turner, if you're looking for like a quick pickup there. He's a pretty good pickup this week, but again, we're not going to go too in-depth with tight ends because we're running out of time, and also, sorry, tight ends. Next up here, I feel like I shouldn't have to talk about this person because I feel like we established a long time ago that this was a fantasy play, but like for some reason, his rostership just never got above 40%, and I feel like there's a good matchup this week, so let's talk about it. Corey Crooms, wide receiver out of Western Michigan, rostered on 36% of rosters on Fantrax. He's going up against Central Michigan this week. Not a terrible defense, but not like a great defense either for Maction. Very neutral, I would say, overall. Hard to ignore the volume he's gotten over the last 3 weeks. 11+ targets in each of those games. 200-yard performances. I don't want to talk about his performance against Miami of Ohio, where he had 13 targets for 3 receptions. Don't worry about that, because Central Michigan, they're an average defense for the MAC. They're not Miami of Ohio. For some reason, Miami of Ohio, very good defense in the MAC this year. I would not start any MAC players against Miami of Ohio this year. But even so, Crooms very much on a roll. The new quarterback situation is definitely helping them out there, and he is the way that they are moving their offense. Their running back situation, Sean Tyler, is fine. It's not great. Darius Jefferson, I believe, is still suspended. So Crooms really is one of the major ways that they are getting the offense rolling. Explains why his target share has been so high. I feel pretty good about Crooms. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, this is a guy that should have been on the rosters from the very beginning. You should have drafted Corey Crooms.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like I shouldn't be talking about him right now, but I am.
Yeah, volume's great. The only thing I will caution, and same thing we talked, same goes for Newton, is our resident meteorologist at Campus Kid, Chris Moxley, has already put out sounded the alarm a little bit of some of these Maction games. Just keep an eye on the weather. I know that there's some stuff brewing somewhere between like Michigan and Pennsylvania or something, Ohio and Pennsylvania. So could factor into these games to just kind of monitor the weather. But otherwise, if all's clear, then I think all systems go for both Newton and Crooms.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty, Nate. I'll have to admit to you, this next call, I don't really like it. I love it. So Nate, we got Dominic Lovett here, wide receiver out of Missouri. What do you like so much about him?
You love it.
I love it.
You love it that we're
I,
talking about love
I had to make a joke like that at some point. I literally sat down before the show as I was typing in his information. I'm just like, I'm gonna make that joke at one point, and like I had a plan later of like you doing his old spiel and then making the joke, and I'm like, no, I can't give Nate the opportunity to make the same joke because he absolutely will go for it. So I'm gonna just say it right at the beginning. Regardless, Nate, love it. What's so good about him this week? Especially since you're a little down on Schrader. What's up here? Why do you like Lovett more?
Well, we talked about the defense that they're playing with New Mexico State. This is the one time where Eli Drinkowitz can say, "Hey, look at us! Look at our great offense. We're going to do great." Where my concerns lie with Schrader and his usage. Dominic Lovett has been the primary target there for Brady Cook. Now that's not great.
It's not saying much,
right? It's not saying a lot, but people think, oh, this is Luther Burden's going to be great.
No.
What if I told you that Dominic Lovett has almost three times the amount of yards that Luther Burden does? Dominic Lovett has been by far the most productive in the pass game there at Missouri. Luther Burden's been saved by a few runs that he's gotten into the end zone, but Lovett is by far their best, their most frequent target. I think that we see them kind of let loose a little bit in this game, and they're going to want to run up the score a little bit so that the fans can get off of Drinkowitz some, and I think Lovett could be the benefactor of that. And I think 100 yards and a touchdown or two is within his range of outcomes this week.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He has really been sneaky good. Like you said, everybody's been so focused on Burden. I just looked up their fantasy scores so far this year in half PPR formats. Lovett's outscoring Burden by about 50%. Like he's about 1.5 times the amount that Burden has gotten so far this year. And because everybody wants the 5-star, they go after him. But this is a dude that probably does really, really well Saturday.
Yep. They were high school teammates too, Burden and Lovett.
Oh, really? I did not know that. I love little snippets like that. It's so fun. All right, last guy we're going to talk about here. And again, caution here. Again, we talked about his quarterback earlier and how his quarterback still might not play based on the injury smoke that we are hearing. But even still, if Zach Pyron comes back, I want his number one wide receiver in Nate McCollum, wide receiver at Georgia Tech, rostered on 2% of rosters. Like I said earlier, they're going up against UNC. And if they get into a shootout, Georgia Tech is going to have to rely on the number one wide receiver to keep them in this game. And he has been the number one wide receiver. 4 out of the last 5 games, he has seen 8+ targets. Last 2 games, he has seen 100+ yards and a touchdown. He has been pretty consistent for this Yellow Jackets offense. Again, this is a guy that if you're going to play him, you play him this week. Don't worry about playing him against Georgia. He's somebody that, like, again, caution on Pyron. I like his ceiling a lot less without Pyron out on the field, but even still, I still might go with Zach Gibson's out there, but I'm not like super confident in it. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, like I said, I don't know enough about the quarterback situation to have confidence really starting anybody for Georgia Tech, even though it is North Carolina. But people don't realize this, that Nate McCollum's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
He's a talented wide receiver. He's somebody that if they got a functional offensive system in with their new coaching staff coming in next year, he's a really nice play dynasty. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining after this year. So sorry, I don't have a ton of confidence in him this week, but I do have a fair amount of confidence with him moving forward into 2023. Yeah.
Again, with Pyron doing as well as he is and everything, definitely you like the future of the passing game for Georgia Tech. And like you said, they get the right hire in there, they'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Last thing we'll talk about real quick with regards to the tight ends. First of all, we're not going to do full breakdowns of waiver wire pickups at this point because let's be real, if you're in the playoffs, you more than likely have your tight end set. Like, you more than likely have dudes that you're relying on a pretty regular basis. You just kind of plug them in. You take the points they give you. Even if you don't have a stud like Bowers or Meyer and everything, you have your favorites that you've kind of picked up here and there that you plug in on a week-to-week basis and say, like, okay, I'll ride or die on this guy. So we're not going to go deep into that. We're not really streaming tight ends at this point. You have your dudes. And then the other part we'll throw out here is Dalton Kincaid is recovering a little quicker than I think a lot of us were kind of expecting. And I think a lot of people have dropped Dalton Kincaid in some leagues, expecting him to be out for the rest of the year. Just go double check your waiver wires to see if he is available. Kind of a similar situation to what Nate alluded to earlier with Tavian Thomas. Mm-hmm. Look for people who gave up on these guys maybe just a little bit too early and try to see if you can take advantage of that real quick. Not promising anything, but just go double check.
Yeah, I've heard of some leagues where he got dropped. Yeah, I mean, it's playoff time. You got to kind of make some moves, and you got to cut any players that really aren't going to factor in that particular week if you need to get a W in order to make the playoffs. So It's possible he could be floating around out there.
Yep. And with that brings us to the end of our show. Nate, you have been phenomenal once again, sir. Again, I can't believe that we only got one more of these recap shows to do. Well, no, that's a lie. We got 2 of them to do. But then we are planning on doing a big show between you, myself, and Chris Moxley. We'll all get on here. Might be a little bit longer of a show. We'll see, depending on how we plan it out and everything. Where we'll recap the season, look at all the trends we had, look at the top players. Fun little recap show and everything. But Nate, you got yourself a big article coming out pretty soon that I know you're very excited to release. So why don't you let the people know what they can expect from that?
Yeah, we touched on it briefly last week. So I have a article that is going to basically be a conspiracy theories, just dream article of potential quarterback transfers and where they might end up and teams that might be looking for a quarterback. So it's going to all be, what ifs and what if this happened, what if that happened. But it's going to be one of my longer articles because I've got a lot of guys that I want to talk about, but I'm having a lot of fun writing it. It should land here in the next couple of weeks. And I think it's going to be one of the more entertaining reads. If you've enjoyed anything that I've put out so far, I think you'll really, really enjoy this. And I should have it out in time for people to read on their travels for the holidays.
I don't want to hype this up too much, but again, based on everything that Nate has told me and teased me with about this article, this thing's gonna be a magnum opus. Like you guys are like, this is gonna be like a full on like Homer's epic. Okay, like this is gonna be awesome. You cannot miss that article. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss it, go check it out on campusofcanton.com. Again, really appreciate all of you guys tuning in. Again, it's crunch time. Really good luck to all of you guys in your matchups this week. Go check out me and Chris Moxley later this week. If you got start dilemmas for your playoff games, that's where to ask it. Keep an eye out on the Twitter at Chasing the Natty on Twitter. We'll be sending out a message for your sit start messages there. Until then, really can't wait to see y'all then. Have a wonderful and blessed day. See y'all.